Welcome to another edition of Play It Through, and this time around it's Batman, brought to us by Sunsoft. Now, Sunsoft also did Blaster Master, Fester's Quest, and Gremlins 2, and they are one of my personal favorite companies of the 8-bit era. Now, even though Fester's Quest is a hit-or-miss game, I think most of the other Sunsoft games that came out in the 8-bit era were great games, including this one. This is one of my all-time favorite games, and it's one of those games that as a kid I used to play it all the time. And even though it has a pretty high difficulty, and most of the time I wouldn't make it past the third, fourth, and especially the fifth level, it didn't matter. I would still pick it up and play it on a consistent basis. It's one of those games that will always be infamous with my childhood. Now, in this game, it has some of my favorite jumping mechanics of all time in a video game, just being able to jump from wall to wall. Now, it's not something necessarily you associate with Batman. That would be maybe more of a Spider-Man trait, but it doesn't matter. It's a hell of a lot of fun to play. And so let's just get on with it with the actual gameplay of Batman. Now, one of the few negative things I actually can say about this game is that it is pretty short, but that's probably attributed to the fact that it was a licensed game based on the 1989 Batman movie, so it was probably rushed in development, so they probably didn't have a whole lot of time to literally flesh out the length of the game. But even with that, and the difficulty, but I really don't attribute that to being a negative thing necessarily. But it's still a great game, as you see the great animation of the Batmobile driving in and Batman jumping out, very nicely done. Now here we go with Stage 1-1. You can hear the great Batman Stage 1 music playing in the background. We'll also hear the song again later on in Stage number 5. But absolute brilliant soundtrack composed by the Sunsoft music crew. Just like they did for all the games. Now the basic, of course, controls for this game is Batman, of course, can jump easily enough, right? He also can punch, but also by pressing start, you can change from 1 to 3 weapons. So you collect the different weapons and you can use them. Of course, you have your Batarang. You also have the missile, and you have another weapon that basically is a spread shot that you shoot out, and it becomes 3, and goes as just gadgets that Batman would use. And they can be used quite to your advantage depending upon certain enemies. Usually the Batarang is one of the better weapons to use against most enemies because of its length, and it also can hit an enemy more than once if you time it correctly while it's going through them. It actually will hit them more than once, sometimes 2 or 3 times. You can get in with just using one Batarang. Now, as I'm jumping through here, I'm going to try not to use too many of the alternate weapons. I'm going to try to use Batman's fist to the fullness I can. But the Batarang is very useful against, especially like those flying enemies right there. Usually 1 or 2 Batarangs will take them out. Of course, if this is one of those games that if you have a turbo controller, it's probably to your benefit to use it in certain parts. I mean, it's not like amazing to use or anything, but it definitely does help at some parts. As I fall all the way down, and I always love that ninja enemy. He takes a whole lot of hits to just kill him, but he's just one of the funnier, just random enemies lurking in this game. He just kind of stands there around the corner. Now here we go with the first boss here, who flies back and forth and then dives at us. He's actually really not that challenging to dodge his moves, and as long as you stay on the left or far right side, you'll be able to easily dodge his spread shot. Whenever he comes down, I like to throw a Batarang in his face in order to do damage. Also, you can just time the punches right and hit him with them as well. But after only a few hits, he's taken care of. And now we get to see the Batmobile driving again, as we're going to be heading into level 2 as we are breaking in. I just gotta love that animation of the breaking open the shutter to enter the building. And here we go at stage 2. Now, even though this game is only 5 stages long, they progressively get longer. Seemingly, the first stage is actually really short in comparison to some of the longer ones. Plus, some of the later stages also have some of the really tough jumping area. This is an area coming up later in the game where it's like almost impossible to make it through without taking at least some damage. I think it's really become infamous from this game. Just only like extreme patience and great skill actually can get through the area without getting hurt. So I'm just saying right now I will end up taking damage in order to get past that area. And I'm using my my bullets there, my missiles. They look like, just look like you Batman shooting missiles or whatever. but I will use them to my advantage. And you just saw right there, I was able to hang onto the side with my jumping ability, and then spring myself off of it to make through gaps. And I will be using it much more in some of these later parts coming up later in the game. I will be using that jump even more so. Like, I can also use it like right there. If I wanted to, I could have bypassed a little bit of an area, but I'll just go up here and go this way. It would have only saved like 1 or 2 seconds if I would have been able to make the jump. And springing off the wall. So that's just one of those things I really like about this game, is that wall springing ability. If they had used, like I said earlier, you think about jumping with hanging onto walls, it would be more of a Spider-Man thing, but it works extremely well in this game. It just makes this game so much fun to just jump around and seeing what jumps you can bypass, what things you can get under, and you have to really use it to your advantage in order to get around the areas, like this whole little gauntlet style area here. In order to get past it, you have to master the wall jump, which, like I said, is just one of those more unique gameplay elements that makes this game an above average action game on the 8-bit systems, because there was just so many games where it just your basic jump and then your attacks, and that was all they had to offer. But at least this game offered this great jumping mechanics, as well as being able to change weapons, so a lot of pluses there, as we are now in stage 2-3. So yeah, and now I'm coming down here, watching out for the exploding landmines that'll hit me, and you basically have only about 6 or 7 different types of enemies to the game, which is kind of a downer, but it really doesn't matter because they use them in strategic places to use them the best. Like those flamethrower guys are always going to be mainly on ledges that you're about to jump to, so you have to time your jumps correctly in order to make it to the ledge without taking damage from the flamethrower. Now, if you accidentally if you're in mid-jump and get hit, you do end up stopping in mid-jump sometimes, so you'll just end up coming crashing back down to the platform below you. So it really comes down to timing in order to get past certain areas without taking damage, or else you end up falling and whatever. So that adds even more challenge to the already pretty challenging jumping. Okay, here we go with the second boss, and this is actually like a 3-part boss. We start off by taking out this 2-gun thing on the right, and now we're going to jump up through the side here, and work my way up this conveyor belt. And I'm going to pull up my Batarangs real quick to take out the second part. And now here we go with the third part on the right, which we are opened up after taking out the other ones. I'm going to jump up and punch it a bunch of times. After only a few hits, it's going to be taken care of. And the second level is now complete, as we see the Joker, and quotes here from the film. And now we go to stage 3-1, and it introduces one of my least favorite enemies in the game. Actually, my least favorite enemies. These giant football. I call them linebacker, half football linebacker, half frog. They just hop around ridiculously, and they just are sometimes relentless. I always suggest killing them as soon as you see them before they gang up on you. Because if you try to just run past them, sometimes they'll just continue to follow you relentlessly, and you'll never get away, and they'll end up just jumping on your head and taking you out. The good news is, if you just saw right there, what I was able to do is sometimes you can get them stuck in a loop where they just keep jumping straight up in the air, and if you can hit them with one of your projectile weapons, you can use that to your advantage, so you don't have to get too close in order to kill them. Okay, and that's going to complete 3-1, and now here we go with 3-2, which looks very similar to 3-1, really not much of a difference, except we're heading down this very large river of very disgusting green water, and jump over and fall down here, and then we're going to have to deal with more of the linebacker frogs, trying to take them out, and we're going to have another one right up here. This game really comes down to becoming good at it, is mastering the jump, and learning certain enemy placements. Once those two things are learned, the game actually is pretty easy. The bosses overall, even for a Sunsoft game, because Sunsoft I think did a pretty good job at making challenging bosses in video games. But even for Sunsoft, the bosses really aren't too bad. Most of them have an easy pattern to learn, or at least an area where you can stand, so you won't take any damage. It's one of those free areas, so you don't take any damage. So they're not too bad, it just really comes down to the levels are more challenging than the bosses end up being. Which I think is overall, I think the opposite for most Sunsoft titles. At least I think so. With Blaster Master, I think the bosses, unless you spammed some of the glitches in Blaster Master, I think some of the bosses were pretty challenging in that. Same thing goes for Fester's Quest.